Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stared at the navigation screen. The cargo hauler rumbled beneath him, old engines making sounds that always made him nervous. He had been flying this route for 3 years now, carrying supplies from one station to another. It was boring work, but it paid the bills. Another 6 hours and we're home, Ben Hayes said from the co-pilot seat. He was eating something that smelled terrible. Probably those dried meat strips he loved so much. Finally get some real sleep. Jake nodded but didn't respond. Something felt off today, though he couldn't explain what. The outer rim was always quiet. Nothing ever happened out here. That was why cargo runners like him took these routes. Safe and simple. Then the alarm went off. Both men jumped in their seats. Red lights flashed across the control panel. Jake's heart raced as he checked the readings. Distress signal, he said, his fingers moving quickly over the controls. Close, maybe 2 kilometers away. Ben leaned forward, squinting at the screen. That's weird. There's nothing out here. No stations, no planets worth visiting. What would anyone be doing in this area? Jake was already changing course. The ship turned slowly, fighting him a little. He needed to get the steering fixed when they got back. Wait, what are you doing? Ben asked, his voice rising. Jake, we can't just investigate every random signal. It could be pirates. Could be a trap. Could be someone who needs help, Jake said simply. He kept the ship on the new course. Ben groaned and threw his food wrapper at the recycling bin. He missed. This is stupid. This is how people die in space. They see a distress signal and go running toward it like idiots. Then stay here and keep the engines warm, Jake said. I'll check it out. They both knew Ben wouldn't stay behind. They had been flying together too long for that. It took 20 minutes to reach the source of the signal. What they found made both men go silent. A small escape pod drifted through space, tumbling slowly. It was damaged badly. Scorch marks covered one side and the hull had cracks running through it. Someone shot at that thing, Ben whispered. Jake, this is really bad. We should call it in and leave, but Jake was already moving. He suited up quickly, grabbed the magnetic tether and headed for the airlock. Ben cursed under his breath but followed him, knowing there was no point in arguing. The escape pod was small, barely big enough for 2 people. Jake attached the tether and pulled it toward their cargo bay. It took both of them to get it inside and sealed. When the bay pressurized, they stood in front of the pod door looking at each other. Ready? Jake asked. No, Ben said. Open it anyway. Jake pressed the emergency release. The door hissed and slid open with a grinding sound. Inside was a child. She was small and curled up in the corner of the pod, her arms wrapped around her knees. But she wasn't human. Her skin had a slight blue tint to it, and strange glowing markings ran down her arms and face. Her eyes were too large, too bright. She looked at them with absolute terror. Holy. Ben started but didn't finish. Jake moved slowly, holding his hands up to show he meant no harm. Hey there, he said softly. It's okay. We're not going to hurt you. The child pressed herself harder against the wall. She was shaking and Jake could see she was injured. Blood, or something like blood, stained her clothes. The fabric she wore was fancy, made from materials Jake had never seen before. Expensive. She's Valyrian, Ben said quietly. Look at the markings. That's definitely Valyrian. Jake's stomach dropped. The Valyrian Empire was powerful and dangerous. They didn't like humans much, considered them weak and primitive. And they definitely didn't like anyone messing with their people. What's a Valyrian kid doing out here in an escape pod? Jake wondered aloud. Nothing good, Ben answered. We need to contact their embassy right now. Get her back to her people and get far away from this situation. But Jake was focused on the child. She was so small, so scared. He knelt down to her level, still keeping his distance. My name is Jake, he said gently. This is Ben, can you tell us your name? The child stared at him for a long moment. Then in a small voice, she whispered something in her own language. Jake didn't understand it. She probably doesn't speak English, Ben said. But then the child spoke again, slower this time. Zira, she said. The word was heavily accented but clear. I am Zira. Zira, Jake repeated, smiling. That's a pretty name. Are you hurt? The child looked down at her side where the bloodstain was largest. She nodded slowly. Jake stood up carefully. Ben, get the medical kit. I'm going to see if I can help her. Jake, we don't know anything about Valyrian biology. You could make it worse, then I'll be careful, Jake said firmly. Go get the kit. Ben left, muttering under his breath. Jake turned back to Zira and moved a little closer. She watched him but didn't try to run. Maybe she understood that they were trying to help. When Ben returned with the medical supplies, Jake cleaned the wound as gently as he could. It wasn't too deep, probably from flying debris when her pod was hit. He bandaged it carefully and Zira barely made a sound. She was brave, he thought. Braver than most adults would be in her situation. There, Jake said when he finished. Better? Zira touched the bandage carefully, then looked up at him. Something in her expression changed. The fear was still there, but mixed with something else now. Maybe trust. Thank you, she said in her heavily accented English. Before Jake could respond, the ship's alarms went off again. But this time it was different. This was the warning for incoming ships. Ben ran to the control panel mounted on the wall of the cargo bay. His face went pale as he read the screen. We've got company, he said. 3 ships, no 4. They're coming in fast. Who are they? Jake asked, already knowing he wouldn't like the answer. Pirates, maybe? No identification signals. They're not Valyrian, that's for sure. The ships are too small, too dirty. At the mention of pirates, Zira made a sound. It was fear and recognition mixed together. She spoke rapidly in her own language, pointing at the screen. I think they're who shot at her pod, Jake said grimly. They're coming back to finish the job. The first impact hit their ship hard. The whole cargo bay shook and the lights flickered. Jake grabbed Zira before she could fall, pulling her close. She clung to him, her small hands gripping his shirt. They're not asking us to surrender, Ben shouted over the noise of another impact. They're just shooting. Get to the bridge, Jake yelled back. Try to lose them, Ben ran. Jake followed with Zira in his arms. The child was light, much lighter than a human child her size would be. The ship shook again, and Jake heard something explode below them. That didn't sound good. They reached the bridge just as Ben threw himself into the pilot seat. His hands flew over the controls, trying to get more speed from the old engines. They're too fast, Ben said. His voice was tight with stress. Our ship is too old, too slow. Jake, they're going to tear us apart. Another explosion, this one much closer. The whole ship lurched to the side. Jake fell, wrapping himself around Zira to protect her from the impact. They hit the floor hard, and pain shot through Jake's shoulder. Hull breach in Section 3, Ben shouted. We're losing atmosphere. And the engines are failing. Jake pulled himself up, still holding Zira. He could feel the ship dying around them. They had minutes at best. The escape pod, Jake said suddenly. Can we reach it? That thing is barely working, Ben said. It won't support 3 people for long. It doesn't have to, Jake said. Just long enough to reach that moon. Ben checked the screens. There was a small moon nearby, barely worth the name. Old mining colony, long abandoned. But it had basic atmosphere processors. They could survive there if they could land safely. It's going to be rough, Ben warned. Another explosion. This one was the worst yet. The bridge filled with smoke, and Jake heard the terrible sound of metal tearing. He looked at Ben and saw his friend's face change. Ben looked down at his chest. There was blood. A lot of blood. A piece of metal from the control panel had gone right through him. Ben! Jake moved toward him, but Ben held up his hand. Take the kid, Ben said. His voice was weak. Get to the escape pod. I'll keep the ship steady as long as I can. I'm not leaving you. You don't have a choice. Ben coughed and blood came from his mouth. That kid is important. Look at her clothes, Jake, those markings. She's probably royalty or something. You have to get her somewhere safe. Jake felt tears in his eyes. Ben, go! Ben shouted with the last of his strength. Go now. The ship shook again. Jake knew Ben was right. He hated it, but he knew. He held Zira tighter and ran from the bridge. Behind him, he heard Ben trying to keep the ship together for just a little longer. Jake reached the cargo bay and the escape pod. He strapped Zira in quickly, then climbed in himself. His hands were shaking as he activated the launch sequence. The pod shot away from the dying ship, just as another explosion tore through it. Through the small window, Jake watched his home for the last 3 years break apart. He watched it and knew Ben was gone. Zira was crying. Jake realized he was crying too, but there was no time for grief. The pirate ships had seen them launch. They were turning, coming after the small escape pod. Jake pushed the engines as hard as they would go, aiming for the moon below. The pod shook as weapons fire passed close by. Jake wrapped his arms around Zira, holding her tight. If they were going to die, at least she wouldn't die alone and scared. Pain woke Jake up. His whole body hurt, especially his left arm and ribs. He tried to move and gasped at the sharp pain in his side. Broken ribs, probably. Maybe worse. "Zira," he called out, panic hitting him. A small sound came from nearby. Jake forced his eyes open, blinking against the dust and smoke. The escape pod had cracked open on impact. They were lying in red dirt, surrounded by rocks and the ruins of old mining equipment. The sky above was gray and ugly. Zira was a few feet away, crying softly. Jake crawled to her, ignoring the pain screaming through his body. She had cuts on her face and arms, but she was alive. That was what mattered. "Are you okay?" he asked, checking her over carefully. She nodded, still crying. "Good, that's good." Jake looked around. The landscape was dead and empty. Nothing grew here. The old mining colony must have left some atmosphere processors working, because they could breathe, but just barely. The air tasted thin and metallic. In the distance, Jake saw buildings, or what was left of them. The old mining base. If they could reach it, they might find shelter. Maybe supplies, but then he heard it. The sound of engines. Ships landing. Jake's blood went cold. The pirates had followed them down. Of course they had. They wanted Zira badly enough to destroy his ship and kill Ben. They wouldn't give up now. "We need to move," Jake said, taking Zira's hand. "Can you run?" She looked at him with those big, scared eyes and nodded. They ran. Jake's ribs screamed with every step, but he didn't stop. He held Zira's hand tight, pulling her along. Behind them, he heard voices. Rough voices shouting in a language he didn't understand. But he understood the tone. They were hunting. They reached the ruins of the mining base and dove into the first building they found. It was dark inside, full of broken equipment and dust. Jake pulled Zira behind a large machine and put his finger to his lips. She nodded, pressing herself against him. The hunters entered the building minutes later. Jake could hear their footsteps, slow and searching. Through a crack in the machine, he saw them. There were 4 of them, wearing mismatched armor and carrying big guns. They looked mean and hungry. One of them spoke. "The kid has to be here somewhere, find her. The boss wants her alive." But he didn't say anything about perfect condition. "Rough her up if you need to." Jake felt rage burn in his chest. These monsters were hunting a child like she was an animal. He looked down at Zira, who was shaking against him. She was so small, so helpless. The pirates searched the building but didn't find them. Eventually, they moved on. Jake waited until he couldn't hear them anymore, then carefully stood up. "Come on," he whispered. "We need to keep moving." They spent the first day running and hiding. The pirates were everywhere, searching through the ruins. Jake found a metal pipe that he could use as a weapon, but he knew it wouldn't do much against their guns. He needed to be smart, not strong. As night fell, Jake found a partially collapsed building with a small room that was still mostly intact. He blocked the door with debris and made a place for Zira to sleep. She curled up in the corner, exhausted. "Why do they want to hurt me?" she asked in her broken English. It was the first time she had spoken since the crash. Jake sat down beside her, his body aching. "I don't know, but I won't let them. I promise." "You're just one human," Zira said quietly. "They are many, and humans are weak. Everyone knows this." Jake looked at her. "Maybe, but weak doesn't mean worthless. And I'm strong enough to keep you safe." Zira studied his face for a long moment. Then she moved closer and rested her head against his arm. "My mother is the queen," she whispered. "I was traveling with guards, but the bad people attacked us. They killed everyone. I escaped in the pod." Jake felt his stomach turn. The queen. This little girl was Valyrian royalty. That explained the fancy clothes, the expensive escape pod. It also explained why the pirates wanted her so badly. She was worth a fortune in ransom. "Your mother will be looking for you," Jake said gently. "We just need to survive until she finds us." "She is very far away," Zira said sadly. "It will take time. We must hide for many days." "Then we'll hide for many days," Jake said. "Sleep now. I'll keep watch." The second day was worse. The pirates found their hiding spot. Jake woke to the sound of debris being moved from the door. He grabbed Zira and ran. Bursting through a window in the back of the building, they almost made it. But one of the pirates saw them. He shouted, and suddenly they were all chasing. Jake ran as fast as he could, but his injured ribs slowed him down. Zira was fast, faster than a human child would be, but she stayed with him. A blast of energy hit the ground near Jake's feet. They were shooting at a child. These monsters were actually shooting at a child. Jake saw a narrow canyon ahead, too narrow for the pirates to follow easily. He pushed Zira toward it. Go, get in there! She ran into the canyon. Jake followed, but he wasn't fast enough. A pirate caught up, grabbing Jake's arm and spinning him around. The alien was big and strong. He punched Jake in the face and Jake went down hard. Got the human. The pirate shouted. The kid went into the canyon. 2 more pirates arrived. One of them kicked Jake in his already broken ribs. Jake screamed, white-hot pain exploding through his chest. He tried to get up, but another kick sent him back down. Where's the brat? One of them demanded, pressing a gun against Jake's head. Jake spit blood and smiled. Bite me. The pirate hit him again. And again. Jake felt his nose break. Felt more ribs crack. But he didn't tell them anything. From the canyon, he heard Zira scream his name. No. She needed to stay hidden. Let her go. Jake gasped. She's just a kid. Take me instead. I'm worth something, right? Human cargo pilot. Someone will pay for me. The pirate leader laughed. Nobody pays for humans. You're worthless. He pointed his gun at the canyon. But that kid is worth millions. Now last chance. Tell us where she is or we kill you and find her anyway. Jake looked at the gun. Then he looked toward the canyon where Zira was hiding. He could see her small face peeking out from behind a rock, tears running down her cheeks. I'm sorry, Jake said to the pirate, but I've got a promise to keep. The pirate pulled the trigger. The blast hit Jake in the shoulder, burning through flesh and muscle. Jake screamed and fell. He expected another shot to finish him, but it never came. Instead, he heard fighting, shouting. Through the haze of pain, Jake saw Zira. She had come out of hiding. She was throwing rocks at the pirates, screaming at them in her language. The pirates were laughing, but they were also moving toward her. No, Jake forced himself to stand. His legs shook. His vision was blurry, but he moved. He picked up the metal pipe he had dropped and swung it with everything he had left. The pipe hit the first pirate in the knee. The alien went down with a scream. Jake swung again, hitting another one. They hadn't expected the human to get back up. That was their mistake, but there were too many. A fist hit Jake's face. A boot caught his stomach. He fell again, the pipe rolling away. The pirates surrounded him, kicking and hitting. Jake curled up, trying to protect his vital organs. One of them grabbed his burned shoulder, pressing hard. Jake's scream echoed through the canyon. Stop. Zira's voice cut through everything. Stop hurting him. She was standing right there in the open, offering herself. No, Jake tried to say, but blood filled his mouth. The pirate leader reached for Zira. Jake saw it happening, saw the alien's hand getting closer to the child, and something inside Jake broke. Not his body this time, something else. Something deeper. He moved. Jake didn't know where the strength came from. Maybe it was adrenaline. Maybe it was pure stubborn refusal to let this little girl get hurt. But he moved faster than he should have been able to. He grabbed the pirate's arm and bit down hard. The pirate screamed and pulled back. Jake grabbed Zira and ran. His body was broken, bleeding, barely working. But he ran. He didn't know how. He just did. They made it to another building, this one with a basement. Jake pushed Zira inside and collapsed. He couldn't move anymore. Everything hurt too much. Zira was crying over him, her small hands touching his face. She was saying something in her language over and over. It sounded like a prayer. I'm okay, Jake lied. He wasn't okay. He was dying, probably. But he needed her to feel safe. Just need to rest. The pirates didn't find them that day, or that night. Jake drifted in and out of consciousness, pain pulling him under again and again. Zira stayed with him, trying to stop the bleeding with pieces of her torn dress. On the 3rd day, Jake could barely open his eyes. He had a knife wound now, too. That had happened at some point. He couldn't remember when. Everything was blurry and confused. Zira was still with him, though. Still safe. He had kept his promise. My mother will come, Zira whispered to him. She had said this many times. Now she sounded desperate. She will come soon. You must wait. Please wait, Jake tried to smile at her. Not going anywhere, kid. That was when he heard it. A sound like thunder, but not thunder, ships, big ships. The kind that made the ground shake. Zira's face lit up. Mother! She screamed. Mother is here. The pirates must have heard the ships too. Jake heard them shouting, heard them running. Heard weapons fire, but different weapons fire, bigger, more powerful. The Valyrians had arrived. Jake tried to stay awake, tried to keep his eyes open, but the darkness was pulling at him, offering peace from the pain. He fought it as long as he could. Darkness, then light, then darkness again. Jake floated between them, not really sure which was real. Sometimes he heard voices. Sometimes he felt hands touching him, but they didn't hurt. That was strange. Everything had hurt for so long. Once he thought he heard Zira calling his name. He tried to answer, tried to tell her he was okay, but his mouth wouldn't work. Time passed. Jake didn't know how much. Could have been hours. Could have been days. When he finally woke up properly, the first thing he noticed was that nothing hurt. Well, everything still hurt a little, but nothing like before. The terrible crushing pain was gone. He could breathe without feeling like knives were stabbing his chest. Jake opened his eyes slowly. The ceiling above him was white and smooth, with lights that glowed softly. This wasn't the ruined mining base. He tried to sit up and managed it, though his body felt weak. He was in a medical room. The bed was more comfortable than any bed he had ever slept in. Strange devices surrounded him, some of them beeping quietly. Through a large window he could see space, stars everywhere. Beautiful. The door opened. A tall figure walked in, and Jake tensed. The alien was massive, at least 7 feet tall, with armor that looked like it was made from metal and crystal. The same glowing markings that Zira had covered the alien's arms and neck. A warrior. A Valyrian warrior. "You are awake," the warrior said. His voice was deep and hard. "Good. The Queen wishes to see you." Jake's mouth was dry. "Zira. Is she okay?" The warrior's expression didn't change. "The princess is unharmed. She has not stopped speaking of you since we found you both." Something that might have been respect flickered in the warrior's eyes. "You should not have survived your injuries. The medical team said you lost too much blood. But humans are stubborn, it seems. Where am I? The royal flagship. You have been unconscious for 5 days while we healed you." The warrior stepped aside. "Come. The Queen is not patient." Jake stood up carefully. His legs shook a little, but they held. Someone had put him in clean clothes, simple but well made. He followed the warrior out of the medical room and into a hallway that took his breath away. Everything was beautiful. The walls seemed to be made of the same crystal as the warrior's armor, glowing softly with inner light. The floor was smooth and warm under his bare feet. Through huge windows, Jake could see other ships, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. All Valyrian warships, all huge and deadly looking. "This is the fleet that came for Princess Zira?" Jake asked. "This is one of the fleets," the warrior corrected. "Queen Ashara brought 12 fleets to find her daughter. We burned 3 pirate bases to ash before finding the signal from your escape pod." Jake whistled softly. 12 fleets. For one child. That was love and power in equal measure. They walked through the ship for what felt like forever. Other Valyrians stopped to stare at Jake as he passed. Some looked curious. Most looked hostile. He was a human on a Valyrian warship, probably the first human most of them had ever seen in person. And from their expressions, they weren't impressed. Finally, they reached a huge door. 2 guards stood on either side, both holding weapons that crackled with energy. The warrior who had brought Jake stopped and turned to face him. "I am Commander Vorin," he said. "I lead the Queen's personal guard. When you enter, you will bow. You will speak only when spoken to. You will show respect. Do you understand?" "I understand," Jake said. His heart was pounding. "The court does not like humans," Vorin continued. "They will try to provoke you. Stay calm. Stay respectful. The Queen values strength, but she also values control." "Why are you telling me this?" Vorin looked at him for a long moment. "Because my princess asked me to make sure you were safe. And what you did on that moon, that was the act of a true warrior, even if you are only human." The doors opened before Jake could respond. The throne room beyond was enormous. The ceiling was so high Jake could barely see it. The walls were covered in detailed carvings showing battles and triumphs, and everywhere were Valyrians, hundreds of them all dressed in elaborate clothes, all watching Jake with cold eyes. At the far end of the room was a throne, and on that throne sat the queen. Queen Ashara was stunning. She was tall like all Valyrians, with the glowing marks covering her skin in intricate patterns. Her hair was long and dark, falling past her shoulders. She wore armor that looked like it was made from starlight, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Her eyes were the same color as Zira's, but where Zira's were soft and kind, Ashara's were hard and sharp. This was a woman who had fought wars and won. Beside the throne, jumping excitedly, was Zira. "Jake!" she shouted, her face lighting up. She started to run toward him, but a hand on her shoulder stopped her. A stern-looking Valyrian woman held her back, shaking her head. Jake walked forward, his legs still a bit unsteady. The court watched him like predators watching prey. When he reached the steps leading up to the throne, he bowed as Vorin had instructed. He went down on one knee and lowered his head. "Rise," Queen Ashara said. Her voice was not as deep as Vorin's, but it carried power and command that made Jake want to obey immediately. He stood, keeping his eyes down respectfully. He could feel the queen studying him, and it made his skin prickle. "You are Jake Morrison," she said. It wasn't a question. Human, cargo pilot, no family, no homeworld allegiance. You work alone, taking whatever jobs pay. "Yes, Your Majesty," Jake said quietly. "Look at me." Jake raised his eyes to meet hers. The impact was immediate. Ashara's gaze was intense, intelligent, and completely unreadable. She could have been about to thank him or order his execution, and he wouldn't know which until it happened. "My daughter tells an interesting story," Ashara continued. "She says you answered her distress signal, that you took her aboard your ship despite the danger, that when pirates attacked, you protected her. She says you fought for her, bled for her, nearly died for her." The queen's expression didn't change. "A child who is not your species, not your responsibility, not even someone you knew. Why?" Jake thought about his answer carefully. The whole court was watching. Zira was watching with hopeful eyes. "Because it was right," Jake said simply. "She was scared and hurt. I couldn't just leave her." A ripple went through the court. Some Valyrians laughed. Others looked disgusted. "Right?" one of them called out. "A human speaks of right and wrong? Humans have no concept of honor." "Weak creatures," another voice added. "He probably hoped for a reward." Queen Ashara held up her hand and the voices stopped immediately. She continued to stare at Jake. "Commander Vorin," she said. "Show them." Vorin stepped forward. He was holding something, a small device. He touched it and suddenly images appeared in the air above the court. Recordings. Jake saw himself on screen, saw the moment they found Zira in the escape pod, saw the pirates attacking, saw everything that happened on the moon. The court watched in silence as Jake took hit after hit, refusing to run or hide. They watched him get shot, stabbed, beaten. They watched him stand up again and again, always putting himself between the pirates and Zira. They watched him collapse, bleeding out, still trying to shield the child with his broken body. When the recording ended, the throne room was completely silent. "This human," Queen Ashara said slowly, "endured what would kill most warriors. He had no weapons, no armor, no training. He was outmatched in every way. Yet he did not run. He did not beg. He did not surrender my daughter to save himself." She stood, and every Valyrian in the room immediately bowed their heads. "This is the purest form of honor. This is what it means to be a true protector." She walked down the steps toward Jake. He wanted to step back but held his ground. Ashara stopped right in front of him, so close he could see the patterns of light moving under her skin. "Our laws are ancient," she said. "One of the oldest laws states that any person who sacrifices themselves to protect a member of the royal family may be claimed by the crown. They may be made a guardian, a consort, or a mate, depending on the sovereign's choice." Jake's brain took a moment to process that. "I'm sorry, what?" "You are worthy," Ashara continued, ignoring his confusion. "You proved this on that moon, but our people will not easily accept a human standing beside their queen. So I offer you a choice." She pulled something from her armor. It was a crystal, glowing with inner fire. Take this. It is my personal seal. It marks you as mine, under my protection and my claim. You will undergo the trial of worth. If you pass, you will become my intended mate, my consort, my equal. The throne room erupted. Valyrians were shouting, some in anger, some in shock. Jake heard the words being thrown around. Impossible. Disgraceful. A human could never pass the trial. But Jake wasn't listening to them. He was staring at Ashara, trying to understand. "You want to marry me?" he asked, feeling stupid for even saying it. "I want a partner who understands what it means to protect those weaker than themselves," Ashara said. Her voice was quieter now, meant only for him. "I want someone who will stand beside me, not because of my power, but because it is right. I want my daughter to have a father figure who will die before letting her come to harm." She held out the crystal. "The trial of worth will not be easy. Most fail. Many die. But if you pass, you will prove yourself worthy not just to me, but to all my people." Jake looked at the crystal. Then he looked past Ashara to where Zira. The training hall was enormous, with ceilings that disappeared into shadows. Jake stood in the center wearing light armor that the Valyrians had given him. It fit well but felt strange on his body. He held a practice weapon that looked like a sword but was made of energy. It hummed in his hand, warm and dangerous. Around the edges of the hall, Valyrian warriors watched. They weren't here to support him. They were here to see him fail. Commander Vorin walked toward Jake carrying his own practice weapon. The big warrior looked relaxed and confident. Jake felt neither of those things. "The trial of worth has 3 parts, Vorin explained, loud enough for everyone to hear. Combat, strategy, and heart. You must pass all 3 to be accepted. We start with combat." He activated his weapon. "Try not to die too quickly. The princess is watching." Jake glanced up at the viewing area. Sure enough, Zira sat there with her attendants, waving at him excitedly. Next to her, Queen Ashara watched with an expression Jake couldn't read. Vorin attacked. Jake barely got his weapon up in time. The impact sent shocks through his arms. Vorin was strong, much stronger than any human. Jake stumbled back, trying to find his footing. Another attack came. Jake blocked, but not well. The energy blade skimmed his shoulder and pain flared. Not deep, but it hurt. The watching warriors laughed. "Pathetic," one of them called out. "A child could do better." Jake gritted his teeth and focused. He couldn't match Vorin's strength. He couldn't match his speed. But Ben had always said Jake was good at thinking on his feet. Time to prove it. Vorin came at him again, a powerful overhead strike. Instead of blocking, Jake dove to the side. The warrior's blade hit the floor, and for just a second, Vorin was off balance. Jake swept his leg, trying to knock the bigger warrior down. It didn't work. Vorin just stepped over the sweep and smiled. "Better. You're thinking, at least." They fought for what felt like hours. Jake got hit a lot. His armor protected him from serious injury, but he felt every impact. Bruises were building on top of bruises. His muscles screamed. His lungs burned, but he didn't give up. Every time Vorin knocked him down, Jake got back up. Every time he missed a block, he learned from it. He started to understand Vorin's patterns, the way the warrior telegraphed his attacks. Jake couldn't beat him, but he could survive. Finally, Vorin stepped back and deactivated his weapon. "Enough," he said. Jake collapsed to his knees, gasping for air. "You have the endurance of a wounded rock beast, human. Stubborn and too stupid to know when to quit. Is that good?" Jake managed to ask between breaths. "For a human, yes," Vorin actually smiled. "You passed the combat trial, not through skill, but through refusal to surrender. That counts for something," the watching warriors murmured. Jake got the feeling they had expected him to fail immediately. Over the next few weeks, Jake trained harder than he ever had in his life. Every morning started with combat practice. Vorin was his primary teacher, but other warriors joined in, each one eager to put the human in his place. Jake lost more fights than he could count, but he learned. Slowly, painfully, he learned. Between training sessions, Jake spent time with Zira. The little princess had attached herself to him completely. She followed him everywhere, chattering in her improving English about her day, her lessons, her friends. Jake found he liked listening to her. She made him smile even when everything hurt. "You are getting better," she said one day, watching him practice. "You almost blocked Commander Vorin's attack that time." "Almost only counts with grenades," Jake said, rubbing his sore arm. Zira tilted her head, confused. What is grenades? Jake laughed and tried to explain. This led to Zira asking 100 more questions about human weapons, human culture, human everything. She was curious about his world, and Jake realized no one had ever asked him about Earth with such genuine interest before. Sometimes Queen Ashara would join them. She didn't say much, but Jake could feel her watching him, judging him, trying to figure him out. It made him nervous, which was probably her intention. One evening, after a particularly brutal training session, Jake found Ashara waiting for him outside the training hall. Alone. That was unusual. The Queen was always surrounded by guards and attendants. "Walk with me," she said. It wasn't a request. They walked through the ship in silence for a while. Jake didn't know what to say. What did you talk about with a queen who was technically your fiancé, but also someone who could order your death with a word? "You are wondering why I chose you," Ashara said finally. "The court wonders too. They think I am mad." "Are you?" Jake asked, then immediately regretted it. "Sorry, that was stupid," but Ashara smiled. It was small, barely there, but real. "Perhaps. My advisors certainly think so." She stopped at a window looking out at the stars. "I was bonded before. To a warrior named Krell. He was everything a Valyrian male should be. Strong, fierce, proud. He died in battle when Zira was 2 years old." "I'm sorry," Jake said quietly. "Don't be. He died with honor, protecting his people. It is what he wanted." Ashara's expression hardened. "But he never protected Zira the way you did. He loved her, yes, but he saw her as a warrior in training, someone to make strong and hard. You saw her as a child who needed safety and comfort." Jake thought about Zira, about how scared she had been in that escape pod. "She's both," he said. "She can be strong and still need someone to protect her sometimes. Being strong doesn't mean being alone." Ashara looked at him with those intense eyes. "No, it does not." She was quiet for a moment. "The second trial is tomorrow. The strategy test. You will face a scenario that has no good solution. How you handle it will determine if you pass. Any advice?" "Yes, remember that strength comes in many forms, and that sometimes the best solution is the one no one else would think of." She walked away, leaving Jake to puzzle over her words. The next day, Jake was brought to a different room. This one had a large holographic display in the center, showing a battlefield, soldiers on both sides, civilians trapped in the middle. "Your mission," an older Valyrian warrior explained, "is to save as many people as possible while defeating the enemy. You have limited resources and limited time. Begin." Jake studied the display. It was a nightmare scenario. No matter what he did, people would die. If he attacked the enemy, they would kill the civilians. If he saved the civilians, the enemy would escape and kill more people later. There was no winning move. The watching Valyrians waited for him to choose, to make the hard decision about who lived and who died. That was what this test was about, Jake realized. Leadership meant making impossible choices. But Jake was thinking about what Ashara had said. The solution no one else would think of. "I refuse the scenario," Jake said. Silence. Everyone stared at him. "Excuse me?" the old warrior said. "I refuse," Jake repeated, walking away from the display. "This scenario is designed to make me choose between bad options. But in real life, you don't have to accept the options given to you. You can change the game." "That is not how war works, human," the warrior said coldly, "isn't it?" Jake turned to face him. "You're testing whether I'll make hard choices. I get that. But you're also testing whether I'll blindly follow the rules of a game I didn't agree to play. Here's my answer. I wouldn't let my people get into this situation in the first place. I'd have scouts watching for enemy movement. I'd have evacuation plans for civilians. I'd have backup forces ready to respond. The real failure isn't in this room. It's in the command decisions that led to this moment." The old warrior's expression didn't change, but his eyes flickered with something. "Surprise? Respect?" "You refuse to play," he said slowly. "I refuse to accept that those are my only options," Jake corrected. "In a real battle, I'd be looking for option 3, option 4, option 10. I'd be creative. I'd be unpredictable, because humans don't have the strength that Valyrians have. We have to win by thinking differently." The room was silent. Then the old warrior laughed. It was a big booming sound. "Option 3, he repeated. "In 50 years of giving this test, no one has ever refused it. They all try to solve the unsolvable puzzle." He looked at the other watching Valyrians. "He passes. Not because he found the right answer, but because he understood there was no right answer and refused to be broken by it." Jake let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. 2 trials down. One to go. The third trial was different. There was no fighting, no strategy puzzles. Instead, Jake was brought to a quiet room where Queen Ashara waited. Only Ashara. No guards, no observers. Sit, she said, gesturing to a chair across from her. Jake sat. He was nervous. Combat he could handle. Strategy he could think through, but this, he didn't know what this was. The third trial is the trial of heart, Ashara said. I ask you questions. You answered truthfully. That is all. That's it? Truth is harder than you think. She was right. Over the next hour, Ashara asked Jake about everything. His childhood, his fears, his regrets, his dreams. She asked why he became a cargo pilot, why he had no family, why he answered that distress signal. Some questions were easy, some were painful. Jake found himself talking about Ben, about losing his friend, about how he felt like he was always running from something but never knew what. Do you love my daughter? Ashara asked suddenly. Jake blinked. Yes, not like a father yet maybe. But I care about her. The announcement ceremony was huge. Jake stood on a platform in front of thousands of Valyrians, both in person and watching through screens across the Empire. He wore formal clothes that Ashara's attendants had prepared for him. They were beautiful but felt strange. He kept tugging at the collar. Stop fidgeting, Ashara whispered beside him. She looked stunning in her royal armor, every inch the warrior queen. You look fine. I look like I'm playing dress-up, Jake muttered back. Zira, standing on his other side, giggled. She wore a small crown and formal robes that made her look older than she was. You look nice, Jake, very proper. Before Jake could respond, the ceremony began. A high priest stepped forward and started speaking in formal Valyrian. Jake didn't understand most of it, but he caught words like honor, worthy, and chosen. The priest went on for a long time, and Jake tried not to shift his weight. His legs were starting to hurt. Finally, the priest turned to Jake. Jake Morrison of Earth, he said in English. You have passed the trial of worth. Do you accept the claim of Queen Ashara? Do you swear to protect the royal family with your life? Do you swear to serve the Valyrian Empire with honor? Jake looked at Ashara. She was watching him, her expression neutral but her eyes showing something softer. Then he looked at Zira, who was bouncing excitedly despite trying to look formal. I do, Jake said clearly. I swear it. The crowd responded with mixed reactions. Some cheered. Some stayed silent. Jake could see the disapproval on many faces. He was human. He would always be human. Some of them would never accept that. But then Ashara took his hand. In front of everyone. It was a simple gesture, but it sent a clear message. He was hers. Anyone who had a problem with that had a problem with their queen. The ceremony continued. Jake and Ashara exchanged crystals, symbols of their bond. When Jake placed his crystal in Ashara's hand, it glowed brightly, responding to her touch. The same happened when she gave him hers. The priest said this was a good sign that their energies matched well. Zira was bouncing so hard now she was almost floating. When the ceremony ended, she threw herself at Jake, hugging him tight. You are my father now, she said happily. My second father. Is that the right word, father? Close enough, kid, Jake said, hugging her back. Over her head, he saw Ashara smiling. A real smile this time, not the careful diplomatic one she usually wore. The celebration that followed was overwhelming. Jake met hundreds of people whose names he immediately forgot. He drank Valyrian wine that tasted like lightning and made his head spin. He danced with Ashara, stumbling through the formal steps while she guided him patiently. You dance like you fight, she said with amusement, with determination but no grace. I'll take that as a compliment, Jake replied. Later, when the celebration finally ended and the crowds dispersed, Jake found himself alone with Ashara in the royal quarters. It was the first time they had been truly alone since the trials ended. Jake was nervous. This was his wife now, or would be, after the formal bonding ceremony next month. He didn't know what to expect. Ashara removed her crown and set it aside, running her fingers through her hair. With that simple gesture, she looked less like a queen and more like a tired woman. That was exhausting, she said, sitting down on a comfortable chair. I hate ceremonies. You hit it well, Jake said. He stayed standing, not sure if he should sit. Sit down, Jake, you live here now. You do not need permission to be comfortable. He sat, choosing a chair across from her. Ashara studied him for a moment, then smiled slightly. You are afraid, she observed. Of what? Of failing you, Jake admitted. I'm just a cargo pilot, Ashara. I don't know how to be a prince. I don't know how to lead an empire. I'm going to mess this up. Probably, Ashara agreed, but her tone was kind. I will mess up too. This is new for both of us, she leaned forward. I chose you not because you are perfect, but because you are good. Because when faced with impossible odds, you did the right thing anyway. That is what I need beside me. Not another warrior, not another tactician, but someone who reminds me why we fight in the first place. Jake felt something tight in his chest loosen. I can do that, he said. I think. Good. Ashara stood and walked to the window. Come here. I want to show you something. Jake joined her. Through the window, they could see the fleet spread out across space. Dozens of massive warships, thousands of smaller vessels. The military might of the Valyrian Empire. All of this exists to protect our people, Ashara said quietly. But sometimes I forget what that means. I see strategies, supply lines, tactical advantages. I forget about the individuals. The children like Zira who need safety, the families who need homes. She looked at Jake. You see them. You always see them. That is why I need you. Jake didn't know what to say to that, so he just stood beside her, looking out at the stars. The next few months were a strange blend of wonderful and terrifying. Jake learned his new role slowly, making mistakes and learning from them. He attended court meetings where he understood maybe half of what was discussed. He trained with the Royal Guard every morning, still losing most fights but getting better. He spent his evenings with Zira, helping her with homework and listening to her talk about her day. And he got to know Ashara. Really know her. Not the queen, but the woman. She was complicated and fascinating. She could be cold and calculating when making military decisions, but gentle and warm when tucking Zira into bed. She had a dry sense of humor that caught Jake off guard. She loved strategy games and beat Jake at all of them. She had nightmares sometimes about the battles she had fought, the people she had lost. Jake learned to be there for her, to listen when she needed to talk, to stay quiet when she needed silence, to make her laugh when the weight of the crown became too much. They grew closer. What started as an arrangement based on honor and duty became something real, something that felt like love, but not everyone was happy about it. General Kalen was a high-ranking military commander who had served the Empire for decades. He was respected, powerful, and he hated Jake. He made no secret of it. A human has no place in the royal line, Kalen said during a council meeting. He looked directly at Jake as he spoke. It weakens us, makes us look foolish. We should maintain the purity of our bloodline. Jake bit back his response. Ashara had taught him that sometimes silence was stronger than words. Jake Morrison passed the trial of worth, Ashara said coldly. He earned his place. Unless you doubt my judgment, General? Kalen bowed his head, but Jake could see the anger in his eyes. This wasn't over. It came to a head during the formal bonding ceremony. The ceremony was even bigger than the announcement had been, with representatives from dozens of alien races attending. It was meant to show the galaxy that the Valyrian Empire had a new consort, to establish Jake's position officially. The ceremony was beautiful. Jake and Ashara stood before the high priest and exchanged vows. Zira stood beside them, holding both of their hands, tears of happiness on her face. When Jake and Ashara finally kissed, sealing their bond, the crowd erupted in cheers. That was when Kalen struck. Explosions rocked the ceremony hall. Screams filled the air as sections of the ceiling collapsed. Armed warriors in unmarked armor poured in, firing into the crowd. Panic spread like wildfire. Jake's instincts kicked in immediately. He grabbed Zira and pushed her behind him, shielding her with his body. Ashara had her weapon out in seconds, already moving to defend her people. Kalen, she shouted. I should have seen this coming. The general appeared through the smoke, his own weapon drawn. He wasn't alone. At least 30 warriors stood with him, all loyal to him rather than the queen. This ends today, Kalen announced. The human has corrupted our queen. He has weakened our empire. We will remove him and restore honor to the throne. You dare? Ashara's voice was filled with rage. You attack during a sacred ceremony. You endanger innocent people. This is honor. This is survival, Kalen said. He pointed his weapon at Jake. Kill the human. The rest will follow. Jake felt Zira trembling behind him. He could hear her crying, terrified by the violence. All around them, people were fighting. Ashara's loyal guards against Kalen's rebels. But Kalen's forces had planned this. They had the advantage. A blast of energy shot toward Jake. He moved on instinct, putting himself completely in front of Zira. The blast hit him in the chest, and pain exploded through his body. He went down hard, gasping, "Jake!" Zira screamed. "Stay down," Jake managed to say. His armor had taken most of the hit, but it still hurt. A lot more blasts came. Jake covered Zira with his body, taking hits meant for her. Each impact felt like being hit by a hammer. His armor cracked. His vision blurred. But he didn't move. Wouldn't move. This was exactly what he had done on that moon. Exactly what had earned him his place here. He protected those who couldn't protect themselves. It was who he was. Ashara fought like a demon, cutting through rebels with deadly precision. But there were too many. She was being overwhelmed. Then Commander Vorin arrived with reinforcements. Fresh guards poured into the hall and the tide of battle shifted. Kalen saw his plan failing and tried to escape, but Ashara was faster. She moved like lightning, disarming him and putting him on his knees. "You have betrayed everything we stand for," she said, her weapon at his throat. "Give me one reason not to end you now."